Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. I'm just allowing a couple of seconds there for everyone to join us. And we have with a large group today, so I'm going to be very conscious that we allow a couple of minutes for everyone to join, and they're coming in really quickly. So anyway, I've passed a good figure there. So I'm going to turn now and welcome Melissa Moore. And Melissa Moore, the retail advisor, set up business about 2 years ago. And I met her about 2 years ago. And prior to that, in her arsenal or itinerary or whatever one would call it, she has Brown Thomas, IKEA, where you'd have strategy and all that wonderful stuff, the Kilkenny Group, and she's worked with Foxford. She has a master's in business studies, which she studied in Dublin after she came to Ireland from London in her early 20s. So she has a vast array of experience. I'm delighted to have met her and to have cajoled her today or whatever into coming and sharing some of her secrets or tips with you. So what we're going to do is the usual. If anybody has a question, please put it in the Q&A and chat. And Melissa is going to stop about halfway through for any questions of clarification. And that's it really. So Melissa, with that, I thank you very much for being here today. And off we go. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Emma. Good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to be here. So yeah, we're going to spend kind of the next maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes looking at ways that you can sell successfully. As Emma said, my background the last 20 odd years has been within the retail sector itself, working with national and international brands. And then since starting the Retail Advisor less than 2 years ago, so just before COVID hit, I started the Retail Advisor, and it's allowed me to work as a retail consultant, a trainer, and a mentor. And it's really mentoring that I've gone back to my love of Irish craft and Irish design. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here this afternoon with you all. So the plan then this afternoon really is to give you an overview. It's such a short amount of time, but I'm going to fly through really developing a sales process for your business. It's vital that you have one, and it doesn't need to be a massive document, but you need to understand the processes to follow in order to do it successfully. We'll then look at improving the selling skills that you have, but to make sure that you're doing it in such a way that you're engaging your customers. And then we'll look at adding value to increase your sales. And obviously adding value, I'm not talking about cutting your margins, putting your stock on sale. It's about how you can add value with what you have to really increase those sales successfully. And I suppose the reason we do this is because not only will the selling increase your bottom line, it'll increase your profits, maybe your margin, but obviously it'll put money in the bank for you and improve cash flow. But we have to be mindful as well, it'll impact your marketing, or maybe your marketing will impact your selling. It'll also impact your logistics. So if you're selling successfully, have you forecasted properly? Are you buying enough materials, raw materials for your work? Are you buying enough packaging? So it's also the impact it has in every part of your business. I'll also look this afternoon in some of the examples at not only kind of the business to business, so maybe you're looking at getting into retail stores around the country, but also directly selling to consumers. So we'll look at B2B and B2C as we go throughout the next kind of 40 minutes. So to start off then, we'll look at developing a sales process to suit you, to suit your specific business. So look, we know the last 18 months has been really tough. Selling has changed, buyers have changed. But also technology, as we well know, has changed everything. 18 months ago, there's no way I would have been talking to you via a laptop in my home in County Mayo. We would have done this face to face. Technology's changed everything. And we leverage that to sell more and more. But the biggest thing I think I need to get across to you this afternoon is that it's still about the human connection. Because if I sat here this afternoon and I sat back in my chair and I didn't engage you, you wouldn't take on board what I'm saying and you wouldn't be interested. So deep down, that part of selling hasn't changed. And if anything, COVID has made us embrace it more. It's about a human connection. And that's not saying that the customer has to love you or even like you, but they need to find a connection to your product in order for you to sell it. So the opportunities, I suppose some people would call this prospecting. Whatever you might term it as, it's about finding the opportunity. So whether that is you going into a retail shop, maybe making a list of all the different retailers that you'd love to be stocked in. Or maybe that's about you selling to individuals via your website or via a pop-up shop. Do your homework. It's not enough anymore to just list these places out with their phone numbers or maybe the buyer's email address. Ask yourself, what has the last 15, 18 months done to them? How has COVID impacted their business? How have things changed? If they weren't online before, are they online now? And how is that doing? Likewise, if it's to your customer sitting at home right now on their couch, are they now working from home full time? Are they in a tech part, an industry that maybe they don't intend to go back to work for the next kind of year? How has COVID changed them? And where are the opportunities there? Seek out their problems. This is huge. When we're selling, to start off with, it's not actually about you and your product. It's about the problems or the issue that the buyer has. So whether that's a retail buyer actually who doesn't have cash flow right now, who is launching product in a new medium because they're going online for the first time, or whether that's your customer that now works from home 3 days a week. So maybe they need that gorgeous smelling candle to invigorate them on their desk because maybe they're not now passing that retail store. How can you get to them? What are their problems? And how can you deliver your product as a solution? So it's about knowing the customer, understanding right now how the last 18 months has affected them in the respect of, have they got new dreams? Do they have new ambitions? What are their pain points? Where can your product help? How can you and your product support them? And you might be sitting there thinking, but I have a gifting product. It doesn't have a problem or a solution. But it does, because if your product is something that can be given as a wedding present, that's what you need to be solving. There is the messaging you need to have. It's not about the fact that it's a beautifully glazed pot that you've spent hours and hours in the process of making. Or it's not about the fact that it's gorgeous luxury hand cream that's sustainable and it's organic. What's the problem it's solving? Get inside the mind of the buyer. It's really important. Stand in their shoes. Think about the problems and how you can deliver the solution. And then also think about leading with the value message. What's the value that your product brings to the buyer's life? What are you solving? What are you doing with your product? So again, it's not talking about the physical product or the price of it or the color of it or the design. It's the value message. It's the emotional connection you're going to have that's going to help you through getting in front of the buyer, getting in front of the customer. So with that, we start our sales strategy. The way I look at sales strategy, it's maybe not the common everyday kind of process, but I think it's a bit more fun and interesting. And it's also something that you can layer and layer over time. Stick this up on your wall in your studio and start to jot down the points of interest of where you can add to your business and how you can support others that you're selling to. So the first step in my sales strategy, it's about surprising and delighting. And what this really means is, how are you going to cut through the noise? So if you're hoping to get into a retail store, how are you going to get in front of the buyer? What can you say? What can you do? Because if that buyer has 20 emails today, or maybe they've had 5 phone calls, why should they talk to you? How can you be different in order to get in front of them? So the first bit of advice, it's not about you, it's about them. So if you've done your homework from the previous page and you've understood that they have a new e-commerce website, they're opening a new store, or maybe they're having to cut back a little bit because things are tough right now. How can you support that? How can your product increase their sales? How can you reach new markets for them? If you understand that and you use this messaging through the right medium, you'll get in front of them. So again, is it posting something the old-fashioned way to the buyer? Is it finding them on LinkedIn and connecting there? Is it getting an introduction from someone else? There's no point you sending an email at 4:30 on a Friday evening. They'll literally be switching off at that stage. So it's having the right message through the right medium. And again, what's that message saying? So are you going to use facts and figures about sustainability if that's what your core product is about? Can you wow them with something different in that email? And then what are you offering them? So a really interesting example of how someone surprised and delighted me about 5 years ago is I received an old-fashioned little parcel in the mail, and it was tiny. It was one of those jiffy bag envelopes. It had my name on. Someone had taken the time to find out my name in the company I was working for. And inside this envelope, I suppose you could say it was like the new version of unboxing. I opened this little jiffy bag envelope and confetti rained down. It literally fell and made a hell of a mess all over my desk. And there was a product inside. Now, I'm not for a minute saying send your products to buyers, they'll go mad at me. But find a way of surprising them, of delighting them. I tell that confetti story to so many people. That confetti story made me pick up the phone and ring this person. And I met them at Showcase that year. And I bought from them. The confetti suited their brand, it suited their product, might not be right for you, but maybe there's something in this that you could use. And then as a consumer, last year at the beginning of COVID, I bought from them again. And when that package arrived to this house last year, I opened it and confetti flew out of the thing. It went everywhere. So again, as a consumer, I'm getting that same wow message. I've told everyone about that. How can you surprise and delight? How can you cut through the noise? That's the first plan. The second one is about engaging. So if you've been successful with surprising and delighting, how are you now going to build a rapport? How can you show that you're trustworthy, that you're credible, that you're authentic? If you're speaking virtually like I am now, you have to communicate better. And I'm going to talk about this in a few moments, but it's about really staring at that camera like you're talking to someone face to face. You need to ooze trustworthiness. You need to be able to build a rapport. And again, it's not about this person loving you or liking you, but it's about showing that you are credible as a maker. And again, how can you get that over? Through your email, through your voice note to them. If you're meeting face to face, it tends to be a little bit easier because the barrier of the screen isn't there. Engagement, it's vital. And added to that then is listening. The art of listening, and that's exactly what it is, it's a form of communication, is absolutely vital. So whether this is with your customers, what are they saying online about you? How are they reacting? Are they leaving you voice notes? When you get in front of a buyer or a retail manager, listen to them. If you've done your homework originally, you might have an idea of the new stores they're opening or the new e-commerce platform they have. Really listen with intent. And I suppose virtually show that by nodding away. And that's not about faking it. It's about actively showing that you're listening. Move into that camera. But when you get in front of them, then you want to question effectively. You need to ask probing questions. Be interested. Again, this isn't about you and your product right now. It's about building the rapport. It's about engaging. Probe them. It's all those open questions, what and where and when. Ask about the business. Ask about their journey. Ask them what they feel the next 12, 18 months looks like. Provoke them. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but it's about saying, well, if you do this, what happens now? You need to get as much information in a conversational way out of them. And then validate what you've heard. So if they've said to you, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, repeat that back just to make sure that you've heard properly. Because what you don't want to do is leave that meeting thinking, oh, I think one thing, but actually they've meant another. Questioning effectively shows you're listening. It shows the engagement. And it's focusing on them as the customer, whether that's a retail buyer or whether that is the customer sitting on their couch at home. This part of your sales strategy tends to be overlooked because all we want to do is jump in and talk about our product and our process and how amazing it is and how excitable we are and how good it is. But if you don't build a rapport with the person you're trying to sell to, why would they want to? So the next vital part of this sales strategy is show and tell. It's old-fashioned show and tell. But what I'd say at this point, don't ever jump to this bit. Don't get so cocky that you think you can jump straight to this bit. Because if you haven't worked at surprising and delighting and warming someone up, if you're not engaged and interested in who's buying from you, if you haven't listened to their story, then you don't have a right to be showing them your product. And you know what? They may not even be interested. So show and tell, I would say, forget the tell part. The tell part should be done on your social media. The tell part should be done on your website. This is where you describe who you are, describes maybe your background, maybe it describes in detail the processes that you go through with your material, with your medium. Use your time wisely. If you're in front of a customer, you're in front of a retail buyer, show them the product. So literally, and I can use a boring old pen as an example, you want to actually be showing them. Now, orange on my hand isn't great there, but you'd probably see it against the black. Practice this. Practice physically showing to the camera whatever you have at the best angles. And the best way to do this properly is have rehearsed the fact that you have 3 or 4 key messages, key points to deliver to them. And what are those 3 or 4 points? They're the things that are solving the problems they have. So now you start to see a narrative. You've found out what the problems are that this retailer or this customer has. You've talked to them, you've engaged them, you've listened to them. Now you're showing them how amazing your product is and what it can do for them. This solves their problem. This makes them more money. This is the sustainable product they've been looking for. This is the wow product that they need. This is the missing category that they have. Show them, but don't bore them with everything that there is to know about this one product or your whole product range. Pick key items, pick key features, and focus on them. And deliver the message in such a way that it talks about the problems and how you're solving them. And then, if you're in person, I want you to pass it over to them. COVID or no COVID, hand sanitizer we know will be vital over the next few years. So once they've sanitized, physically hand them your product. As you would do, I hope, at Showcase, or if you were in a shop. Hand them the product, let them touch and feel. Let them feel the weight of it, the finish of it, what the cream feels like in their hands. If you can get a product into someone's hands, they're more likely to buy it. This is the exciting bit. It's obviously something virtually that's really hard right now, but I have a couple of tips later that might help you with this. Show and tell is amazing, but only do it if you've done the first few steps. Moving on, then we look at adding value, and customers only buy what they value. So whether that's the emotional connection, whether that's they value it because it's solving a problem that they have, adding value is vital. And a buyer to understand how you add value to their business will help you sell. But the biggest thing here, and actually what might be different to my sales strategy to the way a lot of the old-fashioned sales strategies are, I want you to stop thinking about closing the sale. Why would you go through these steps? Why would you work really hard and do your homework and try and engage to then say goodbye to someone who's just bought from you? So to reframe that, I want you to stop closing the sale. Start thinking about opening up this relationship. And I suppose relationship is the word I use because it is about connecting emotionally. But also, research showed us that someone that returns to us and buys from us again is a long-term customer. They buy more, they spend more, and they tell their friends. There, in a nutshell, is a sales strategy. People buy from people. If you can connect, you've opened a relationship that will be long-term. And even if you make bespoke pieces that are one-off kinds, you want people to tell their friends, to tell their family, to share the experience they had with you. And then maybe their friends or family will buy. Our biggest sales resource are the people that buy from us. They come back and they bring their friends. So the increased customer satisfaction will equal a long-term relationship. And then you don't need to try as hard to continually find new customers and new ways of selling, because you'll be validated what you're doing is working. So a couple of actions, and I like to do this, it might frame things properly in your mind. Some questions for you to take away. Ask yourself, the reason my products exist is, and it's not about the fact that you love working with the medium that you have. It's not about the fact you're incredible at it. What are the problems you're solving with the products that you have? Think about that. And then remember, every single contact you make should have a clear and reasonable ask. So what do you want from the person that you're emailing, you're talking to? It should create a mystery or a delight, like that confetti that came raining down. You need to have an offer ready. So what are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve by meeting this person, by getting in front of them? And then what's the benefit for the customer? So be that you sitting this afternoon in front of a camera for your Instagram account, or be that you hoping to get in front of a retail buyer, make sure that you tick all these boxes, because then you're more than likely to start your sales journey, because the connection will be there. So before I go on, because that sales strategy is a little difficult sometimes to get in the right order and not to kind of jump away from and show straight away, are there any questions, Emma, so far?
I think you're doing all right. I think everybody's intrigued and listening. I have a question.
Go for it.
I'd like to put you on the spot by asking you how your IKEA experience and the strategies that you learned in IKEA can be adapted to the craft and design situation.
Definitely. Let me go back. So surprise and delight. And again, not everyone's an IKEA fan, and that's fine. But if we think about process, as you asked, surprise and delight, that's what IKEA do. If you think about their TV adverts, if you think about the mediums that they use, it is about catching people out. You could have different TV adverts that might mean different things for different departments in the store. It could be the fact that we surprise and delight. There's a big children's play area in the Dublin store, as there is in many of them. It's getting something interesting for everyone. And I suppose IKEA sells all things almost to the masses. That was the idea about volume selling. And then they engage across obviously different mediums. They listen, and I think this is really important for people to hear, is that listening isn't just about watching that website feed or that social media feed. IKEA's communication teams go out and physically visit thousands of homes every year, and they sit there with surveys and they actually interview and engage with thousands and thousands of homeowners. They did it even during COVID. They obviously did it virtually last year, and that data they bring back then, and that plans then what happens for the next few years. It plans their buying decisions. It plans how they sell to people and maybe the messages they use. Show and tell, obviously everyone knows the showrooms that they have. It's very tactile, touch and feel. And I think as well, yes, online's been really successful for them, but as much as you might hate walking around for 2-3 hours in an IKEA store, it is that tactile feeling that people really love. Adding value, it is huge to them at every point. It's why price is low, value they really feel is high, be that giving you spare parts for something you might need, be that feeding you while you're in a store. And for them, it is a long-term relationship. They have a children's department for a reason. They want to catch customers when they're that small, that when they buy their first home, people think of IKEA, all the way up to when you've retired and maybe you're downsizing. And again, you're visiting IKEA again. So it is a lifelong journey with IKEA. And I think those processes, even if you aren't a lover of the furniture or of the meatballs, the processes are very simple and they're there for a reason.
And these simple processes, I definitely think that you can bring to craft and design, isolated from the actual products that IKEA are selling.
Absolutely. And I think that's it. As I said, my sales strategy isn't fancy. It's not about the big words. It's about fundamentally just following this little journey that gets you what you need to do. At the end of the day, it's to sell to people, but to have them come back as well. And we often forget that. It is about opening a relationship with customers. You want them to tell their friends and family. They need to keep coming back to you in order for you to sustain your business long term.
Great. So I tell you what, we'll keep going with your journey and then we'll bombard you with questions at the end. How does that sound to you?
Super. Thanks, Seema. So to improve your selling skills, and again, it comes back down to this engagement with customers. When companies connect with customers' emotions, the payoff can be huge. This really brings your selling skills alive. So for me, communication is massive. You can't sell without doing this really well. So as we looked at before, focus on that person and listen to them. It is about actively listening. So whether that is you on a laptop talking to a buyer about your product, really listen in. And I mean physically. I'm on the edge of my chair here. Physically listen in. Watch your body language. 56% of our communication is our body language. And even on a laptop like I am today, you can see me moving my hands. You can see me moving in towards the camera. And it's just as important if you were stood at a stand at Showcase or you're meeting a buyer. You want open, relaxed body language. It is something you can practice. And if you're not comfortable with it, you have to practice it. What you don't want to do is be leaning on something. You don't want to have your arms folded. You don't want to sit on your hands. You need to be open and relaxed. And you might think, well, that's got nothing to do with my product. If you look like you're bored, if you look like you're not interested in being there, you're sending really negative communication messages. And then that's feeding back into what the buyer's thinking. Understanding what's not being said is much more difficult, obviously via Zoom, on an online platform. But obviously in person, it's watching their buying signals. It's watching someone else's body language. It's reading and understanding what's not been said. So again, you can come in with your value messages. You can talk about the solutions you have to someone's problems. Notice your tone and your pitch. And actually, that's whether you're in person or, more importantly, if you're on a laptop, if you're on the phone, these are acts of communication. So I'm probably using my hands a lot more this afternoon than I would do if we were in a live room. On the phone as well, you're acting. It's not about not being authentic. It's about the fact we use devices and it creates a barrier. So be mindful of your tone and your pitch. Slow down a little when you're using a device because you're missing a big chunk of body language. It's often harder for other people to take on board everything you're saying, especially if you're showing at the same time. So that's why this afternoon, every single little word I'm saying isn't on the screen, because how can you listen to me, look at the picture, read the words all at the same time? So you have to break it up. And then be honest. It goes without saying, be honest and truthful. Show integrity in your communication with your selling skills. And then one thing I can still learn to do a lot more. Learn to be silent. It's okay to have pauses in the conversation. If you show that you're not there frantically looking for a pen or scrambling through some pieces of paper, it's okay to have silence in the selling. Because have you ever been in a situation where you're thinking about buying something and you're not sure, and you just want the person in front of you to be quiet so you can think? So if you are chatting away to a buyer and you have made them an offer or you've shown them your product, give them a second to think, especially if they're looking down and reading their notes, especially if they're staring at your product. Give them a moment to gather their thoughts and come back to you. Don't talk in that little gap. And it's more important if you're selling virtually. Give them a moment, because there's so much going on right now. They need to think clearly. So learn to be silent. And as I say, it's something I definitely could do a lot more of. Handling objections then and troubleshooting is always interesting when it comes to selling. People always say to me, oh, but what do I do if? So again, if you know the problems that your customer has, you know the solutions you can bring, handling objections will be easier because you should already have those logical steps in your mind. You have them scripted. You have go-to sentences to have ready. So if a customer says to you, oh, but I wanted to buy more sustainable products, you've got sustainable products, and now all of a sudden they're not sure about your product. Clarify back to them that they did say they were looking for sustainable products. Clarify back to them that they talked about having Irish made, beautifully glazed floral pottery, if that's exactly what you do. Clarify what they said was important to them. The next thing to do, if a customer's becoming unsure, remind them of that dream. Remind them of what they hoped to achieve when they first came to you. If you remind people of that desired outcome, maybe that's sometimes all they need to connect to your product. Because if they came to you in the first place, or they were looking online, or they set up a meeting, there had to be something there in the first place. So remind them of what that dream end goal was. And then to price. And price is always a big one. I would always say never reduce it. Mind your margin. It's really important. You need to come to that conclusion. There's no right one answer fits all here when it comes to being expensive, bringing value. Your price is your price for a reason. And if you've worked on it and you know your pricing is correct, stick to it. You also have to understand that there are some buyers, be them business to business, be them business to customer, that your product is just too expensive for. And then you have to let them go, because the value you bring will never be appreciated if you reduce that price right down. If they can never truly afford you, you have to let them go. But then there's always another customer to replace them. So it's okay to say no to people. It's okay for people to think that your product is too expensive if you've done the work to get your pricing strategy right. So with objections, like complaints, have resolutions ready. Have the problems you solve ready in your mind, so that when actually an objection does come up in conversation, you're confident with a reply. Something else I want to throw in here when we talk about selling and selling tips, because I feel over the last year since COVID that we don't like to talk about selling anymore. It's not a nice word. But here's one thing that will always be important, be it business to business or be it business to customer. The additions, the complementary products. What's in your range right now that adds to the hero products? Add-ons are meant to help the customer enjoy their first initial product they have from you. So if you have one hero product and you have several things that complement it, talk about them. It's not forcing someone to buy more than they need. It's not about being pushy. If a buyer's asked you to see one specific product and you strategically mention 2 or 3 more, that's okay. Because if your hero product is made better by the addition of 2 or 3 other things, they have a right to know that. Because what if they only buy your hero product and that hero product doesn't do very well? Because actually the customer was hoping to buy the hero product plus the complementary one. So if you sell a face balm and you know it sells really well with an eye cream, talk to them about it. If you sell a fabulous necklace and you know you sell earrings that just fit right with them, talk about it. And talk about it to your customers online. So on your website, if you have this hero product, I'm really hoping that underneath you have the complementary products right there and then. And whether the customer or the retail buyer buys all these additional products from you straight away, there and then, it actually doesn't matter, because the main thing is they know about it. So as a consumer myself, if I go and buy a handbag and someone shows me the wallet or the purse that matches, I might not be able to afford the additional product straight away. But I will go home and think about it. And maybe at the next birthday or the next Christmas, I might drop a hint to my husband. It's something I might like, or I might go and buy it for myself. Likewise, if a retail buyer knows you have additional products and they start to see these core few products doing well, they will come back to you. If there is a need and a demand that you've built up with loyal customers and you're suiting their needs as a retail store, they will come back and buy them from you. So again, it's not about closing the sale with this initial buy from a buyer or a customer. It's about the long term. It's about opening the relationship. So talking about complementary products is vital for your sales strategy. Something I want to throw in at this stage, Lee Cockrell wrote a fantastic customer experience book. He talks about the 36 rules. Lee Cockrell actually worked for Marriott and Disney, so he's very much from a hospitality background. But be your own Shakespeare was his rule number 10. And the reason I bring it up at this stage when we're talking about kind of selling strategies, be it in person or virtually, is he talks about writing a script. If you're so passionate about the products that you make and the journey that you go through and the processes you use, then you deserve to write the script that the retail buyer goes on. You deserve to write the script that your customer goes on if they're buying from you online. You write the ideal scenario of you finding the right store, of you contacting the buyer with some mystery, with some inspiration in that first email. What does that first meeting look like? How well do you listen? What are the values you can bring? How does the show and tell go? Be your own Shakespeare. Write the story once you follow those steps. And then once you know that you can talk about all the additional products that you have. It's a really great book. And even if you never read it, think like Lee. Think about writing the script for your journey to be able to sell more successfully. So, second load of actions, I'm afraid. Brainstorm. How can you emotionally connect with your customers? And when I say customers, again, it's that retail store, or it's your customer that's sitting at home on their couch. How can you build on that for the long term? And again, a sales strategy has to be for life. It's not just for this year or going into Christmas. And then I'd love you to list, what are the 3 main objections that you face? If you're more prepared for objections, if you have resolutions, you'll overcome them with confidence. So key things, they take time, but it's worth doing. So the final section then this afternoon, it's adding value. And again, value doesn't mean about giving away your profits. I would never encourage people to cut margins or cut prices if you've done your pricing strategy properly. So adding value doesn't always cost you, but it should make you money. So when I talk about adding value, what do I mean? Well, for starters, you ever been to a hurling match and you're there on the sidelines and you're all wearing the same jerseys or the same hats and you're cheering for your team? Have you got a loyal tribe? Do you have a group of people that champion you? Because maybe other people want to join your tribe. That's adding value. When we hear of all these kind of crazy latest Nike trainers that are on limited release, there's thousands of people that want to jump on board and buy them because they want to feel part of something. So maybe for you, that's about the Made Local campaign. Maybe that's about joining that tribe. If you can join a tribe or you can encourage your customers to join that, that's adding value. You're adding to them. They want to be part of what you're giving. And then also, how can you engage customers through added entertainment? This is key. We know this year that this is a key trend coming out. It is about added entertainment. So be that on your website, be that in the old days, pre-COVID, going into store and doing a meet and greet, or even a show and tell with customers on the shop floor, you explaining your product, you showing your product. How can you engage better? So on the virtual note, this is really interesting. This is Orb Media. They're a Dublin-based company. And actually what they do is like a 360. It's incredible. They build retail shops. They can show retail product. And their stats here are fascinating. 75% have higher purchase intent after a 360 experience. So actually, maybe this is how you really excel virtually. It isn't about having a Zoom chat with just a retail buyer. Maybe you redo your platform. If you have a bog standard Amazon grid on your website right now, maybe you need to start looking for something different. How do you stand out from the crowd? How can you add entertainment to everything you do? Really interesting. Great Irish brand. Only came across them recently. But again, any way you can stand out and you can really show the customer you're an expert is going to make them want to come and see what else you have. So other ways then that you can add value. Differentiate yourself, as I said. What have you got that is unique, that is different? Why should people come and join your tribe and buy from you? So is it the level of expertise that you have in the medium that you use? And we know, of course, it goes without saying, you probably have a higher quality of product than anyone else on the market. Shout about it, but do it in a way that's solving a problem. Don't just talk about the medium that you're using or the way you make something or the beautiful colors you use. Talk about it in a way that someone wants to buy from you. We know your products are unique. I'm a big fan. There's plenty of them in this house. But again, how are these unique products solving someone's problem? You may well give outstanding service. Maybe you call the customer that buys from you every time they buy. Are you running a legacy brand? Is it iconic? Is it a wow factor? Has it been going for such a long time? How can you leverage that? And then a trust factor. And I find this really fascinating with makers, with creators, because you handle your product with such love and care and attention. I think there's a trust factor there. But I know a lot of the mediums that you're working in. I know how much you love and cherish and how respected what you do is. Do new customers, do new retailers. So how can you communicate the trust factor they should have? Because you love everything you do and you're expert at it. So again, it's about taking what you know and delivering that message in a very different way to ensure people come back and sell and buy from you. So finally then, Keenan wrote a really interesting book on gap selling, if you fancy looking into this kind of area a bit more. But what he says is really important. He says it's not about pitching products. It's about solving problems and making life easier. And if that's the one thing you take away from this afternoon, stop starting your sales process with your product. Stop talking about you first. Stop talking about the process first. Talk about the customer. Talk about their problems. Leverage off that and then introduce your product. It's a much nicer way in to selling to people. So finally then, how can you do the following? And again, this might take you a bit of time. It might be something to think about over a cup of tea. How can you surprise your customers? How can you personalize your offerings? How can you communicate your uniqueness? If you are expert at what you do in the medium that you use, how can you talk about it in a really meaningful way that solves a problem? And then how can you prove that you're the expert? So again, it's not about certificates. It's not about qualifications in some respects. Can you video it? Can you show them? Can you show intricately working on a product that solves a problem someone has? And then when's the best time to mention these things? Is it on your website? Is it about having a virtual way of looking at your unique products? Is it when someone's about to buy? How connected can you be to the person in store or the person sitting on their couch? Or should you be having this conversation at the very beginning? Are you the one that hooks people in to buy from them? Because if it's all about you, then you should be front and center of all the selling that takes place. So that's, in a nutshell, is a really brief overview of selling strategy and how you can leverage it. So as I say, yes, your products are amazing. Talk about the customer first and then introduce your product. So Emma, on that note, have we got any questions?
We're all stunned in silence.
It's a lot to take in a few minutes, I have to say.
It certainly is. I'd like to tease out, you have experience in what I would consider a whole gamut of areas. Okay, I mean, in my narrower experience, you have IKEA, you have Foxford, you have Brown Thomas, and you have the Kilkenny Group, okay, which is reasonably impressive. So, to say the least, taking those four, could you, just without going into too much depth, pick an item on sales strategy from each experience without being too specific that you think are really useful to my audience here today?
Absolutely. Well, I suppose we'll start with Foxford. There's nothing more exciting than hearing the churn of those machines going. So with Foxford, especially if you visit the mills themselves, what better way of showing someone or starting that selling experience than bringing them on a tour? Like, you're physically seeing the making taking place. And I think in a nutshell, it's really easy nowadays. We all have phones, and literally that's all it takes with, as I was showing you earlier, a ring light. Video your process. And I know more and more makers are doing this, but again, how are you solving a problem? So you go to Foxford, you go on this incredible mill tour, you see the pieces being made, like they're physically being made in front of you. And ironically, I'll never forget the customer who came in and said, "So these are all shipped from China then?" And you're going, "No, you've just been on a tour." So again, it's about the customer understanding the authenticity of what you do, that you're an expert of what you do, and communicating that in a way that they really get it. Because having been on a tour that day, I'll never forget this guy. He couldn't comprehend that the things that were being made were actually the things we were selling. And once he got that, he was more than happy to buy. And he loved the fact he could be sending them home as gifts for the new baby or for the sofa at home. So you're fantastic at probably filming what you do, but is the messaging right? So I think that's my biggest learning from Foxford, is with the best will in the world and having this amazing mill working there behind us every day, people still didn't really believe that they were the products we were selling.
Okay, and the Kilkenny message learning that you would have, that, I mean, and I mean you, because I mean, I've had the pleasure of the Kilkenny Group speaking with us. I mean,
absolutely.
Last, in fact, it was this day last year.
No,
I had the Kilkenny Group, Evelyn and Laura.
I remember it. I was on the call.
We're on with us. So I mean, so we have that video in the archive, and many of our clients have a great relationship with the Kilkenny Group. But what nugget did you take away?
I think the big nugget, and I'm sure Laura and Una will appreciate me saying this, don't be sending products to buyers. You know, the first thing you really need to do is do your homework to get your foot in the door. So don't be sending products, because they'd be absolutely killing me if I'm telling you all today to be sending them products to have a look at. But wow and delight them in that first email, if it is an email. What's going to make you stand out? Because if you think buyers like that get so many emails every day, they get so many people wanting to meet them, what's the message you can put across in your email that's going to make it stand out? So much the same as we all write kind of MailChimp emails now to our email lists, What's that short sentence you can put in the tagline? What's that first impression like? So the very first sentence, what will make them actually look at you more? That's the biggest thing. And then I think from a shop floor perspective, it is definitely the hands-on approach. It is showing the customer this product. So whether when we're allowed, again, you get in and you do a show and tell, whether it's when you get in front of a buyer or even a customer at something like Showcase or another one of the shows at the ODS, you physically want to be able to hand them the product so that they can touch and feel. Because I know we were talking before this, Emma, it is about tactile. It, especially with the designers and the makers, you want to be able to touch and feel. You want to feel the product. You want to feel the weight of a lot of these things, and it really grounds you in the fact that then you'll see it in your home. You'll be able to see it on you, and you'll want to buy it.
Okay. We looked a little bit earlier at the IKEA and the learning from IKEA. What's the Brown Thomas learning?
I think it's the wow factor. So much like Kilkenny, we know they have amazing windows. We know the in-store experience is incredible. So actually you as a seller, what can you add to that? So is that the fact that you're going to wow them with the confetti when they open your parcel? Is it that you're going to wow them with your promotional detail? Is your packaging incredible? How are you going to add to that? It can't all be about you and your product. What are you bringing to them when you come on board? If they're going to buy from you, what can you give them? And I think that's the biggest thing from Brown Thomas. If you think of all the luxury brands that they have, they don't just sit there in silo. They might all be different brands, but they're all bringing huge amounts of value to the business.
That's a very, very good point. I have a question here.
Yep.
If your sales are largely online, would you give any alternate or additional advice?
Yeah, because I think it's all about adding value now and adding content. So be that a blog post that might be on your website, because you have to think about, even if a buyer's not ready to buy today, you want to keep getting that traffic to your website. You want them to keep coming back to you. So even if, I don't obviously know what your product range is, but for instance, if there's a top 5 gifting for Father's Day coming up this weekend, if there's something you sell for Father's Day or Mother's Day or Christmas, what's the added content you can have that someone could read, that they could have a look at, they could share, to drive people to your website, even if they're not buying, because then they start to sit in the unconscious bias. The more people can think about you and your brand, even when they're not buying, the more likely they are to buy from you when they need to. So I suppose, much like a lot of the social media experts would say, keep showing up, keep engaging. Content is the biggest medium right now. So be it blog posts on your e-commerce website, recipes as well with makers, anything you can do that your product solves the problem for, talk about it through blog posts. Of course, it's going to up your SEO. But again, for the average customer sitting at home on a Tuesday night at 10 o'clock with a cup of tea, what can they be reading that takes them away from your competition and drives them to your website?
Good answer. Okay, here's a real chestnut. How do you think the balance between bricks and mortar retail and online is going to pan out over the next 2 years?
I knew someone was going to ask me something like this.
It was me, I'm afraid.
McKinsey and Co did some research just prior to us reopening again. 20 different countries, I think, all sorts of different retail categories. And I have to say, they said really the research was telling them that it would slightly be heavily weighted towards online than it would bricks and mortar. But look what happened at Christmas is all I'd say. Be that in Ireland, be that in the UK or the rest of Europe. We've seen how incredible it's been in China and the Far East over the last few months, now that they've reopened. I do think people want human interaction. They want a connection. They want incredible customer experience. So for me personally, the high street is not dead. It is not going anywhere. But I do think you need omni-channel. So if you are in bricks and mortar, all well and good, you still personally need to have a strong branded website and vice versa. So I think there's room for everything, Emma.
Good. And we've been working, we're trying to support all of our clients in that kind of digital journey, and I think that the craft and design enterprises have made huge leaps and bounds in this area, which is really, really good. And then trying to hang on to that and the tactile is an interesting challenge. I have a really nice one here. Okay. Hi, Melissa. Thank you so much information here. And all delivered in a way she understood. That's great. In terms of your customer tribe, would you have rewards incentive for repeat buyers, like a discount code? I don't like pushing sales newsletters into people's boxes when they have given me the right to send something to them, but I would like to offer something to repeat customers. What do you think?
That's really lovely. And I 100% agree with you. The last thing you want to be doing is selling constantly, especially if you are emailing out things. Likewise, even on your social media, you shouldn't be selling all the time. It should be a nice balance of you and your processes and the value you bring. But I think, and again, if your pricing's right and you can afford it, then absolutely. I think it's really nice to be able to give back. I wouldn't do it too often because it will devalue the brand, but maybe coming up to the autumn, so pre-Christmas buying, maybe in the run up to Mother's Day or Father's Day, again, pre the rush. Is this actually something you can do to funnel new customers or even help their friends? Because I'm wondering, if people are buying from you already, that's great. Could you give them 10% off? Could they refer someone? Could you actually leverage these people as your tribe to bring new people to your brand? So maybe even think about it that way. But again, don't do it too often and only do it if you can afford it.
Melissa, thank you so much. It's been great to have all your insights. I'd like everyone to know, particularly those of you who have applied for the Building Craft program and the Get Set program, that Melissa will be joining us on those programs. If anyone has any mentoring issues, please get in touch with me and I can team yourself up with Melissa. And I'd just like to say thank you to everyone. And I'd like to say thank you to you all that we're looking forward to the launch of the Made Local campaign, which my colleagues are telling me is up and going on the 23rd of June. That's great news. And I just want to kind of scan here, Melissa, to see if I've got everything here. They're all thank yous, big thank yous. Dan is telling us that he informs his best clients in advance of all new product lines. I think that's very sound advice, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very thoughtful and helpful, great ideas. Thank you. So Melissa, your presentation will be available to all our audience afterwards. And hold on, just check my other session here, just so I haven't missed anybody. Oh yes, one last question will go. Okay, here we go. Do you have any suggestions for a jewelry designer to wow and delight? And just before you answer that, I'm going to put a plug. My jewelry and goldsmith people, I'm doing a special Brexit for goldsmiths and anybody else who wants to join us on the 14th of July. So here we go. Do we have any suggestions for jewelry designers to wow and delight customers?
Oh, interesting. So if you're starting that sales funnel, it definitely would be adding a bit of sparkle. So if you're trying to get into retailers, and again, I know I'm going back to the confetti because it's something I love, might not suit your brand, but what can you do to add a bit of pizzazz? So again, maybe it's not sending a package, but maybe it is about getting some amazing shots done. Is it a video of the making? Is it a wow close-up photography package of those pieces? Is it sending postcards out of this? There's got to be a way of you getting that message of the beauty of the jewelry to your customers. That's an interesting one. Hit me up after this and let's have a chat, because I'd love to figure out how we wow customers with jewelry, because it's never as easy. It always depends on the category.
Well, anyway, there's your first date out of this one. Okay, so I'll team the two of you up afterwards if that's okay. And listen, thank you. I cannot thank you enough. Absolutely brilliant today. And thanks everyone for joining us. As usual, it was a pleasure. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.